All right, I will call this policy committee meeting to order, September 11th at 6:11 p.m. Item 2, roll call. Russ Ewert.
Here.
And Kim Higginbotham.
Here.
And Tom Barney is here as well. Item 3, agenda revisions and approval.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Russ, second by Kim. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. Item 4, approve minutes. Item A, approval of July 10th meeting minutes.
I'll make the motion to approve the July 10th, 2023 meeting minutes.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Kim, second by Russ. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Item 5, new business. Item A, discussion and action regarding updates and modifications to district policies 0100 through 9800.01. From what I understand, the packet that you've hopefully looked at, we've got about a third of the policies that are in the latest batch of updates from Neola. So after tonight, our work will not be done. We will have to meet once or twice more, probably before the end of the year, just to finish out that group. So we'll be looking at 8 revisions, 3 new policies, and 6 policies that are being rescinded. And Dr. Reuter, if you want to
Thank you.
go from there.
Had a
We'll
wonderful
get started.
3-hour marathon with our Neola rep just this last week. And as Mr. Barney said, this is a portion of the total booklet that we received. These were the ones that I itemized out for this evening instead of doing all of them at once. These were the ones that made sense with urgency moving forward. We'll probably have possibly 2 more meetings before the spring edition comes out, which will include, again, Neola recommendations, and there are a couple from district administration of current policies we have in place with slight modifications we'll bring forward. All of the policies tonight were from Neola and their recommendations. As you see in the overview, there's a rationale that I'll go through this evening, as well as the recommendations for either legal purposes, clarification, or recommended but not necessarily required, and that's your decision as a policy committee. So we'll start, Mr. Barney, right away.
Please.
So
Yeah,
if we would
policy
start with
0142.1.
Yes, so
Electoral.
that is related to our bylaws and the electoral process. This policy has been updated to clarify requirements for a qualified elector to file a declaration of candidacy, as well as the requirements for incumbents seeking re-election. The legal citations have also been updated, and this is recommended by Neola for consistency with state statute language.
All right. Any questions from the committee on this one?
It was pretty straightforward.
All right. Let's move on to 0143.1, public expression of board members.
This policy has been updated to include instances when board members make statements to individuals or members of the community that may cause issues for the board and/or the district if not made clear that those statements do not reflect the views of the board or their colleagues on the board. This is recommended but not required. You'll notice there's a note here in red that's stricken. That's not part of our policy. That was noted by Neola that back in 2016, social media was added to public expression of board members, and it was Neola at the time said this would make sense to add social media, but it was declined by the board in 2016. I don't know the history on that. I would recommend to add social media, as that's become even more prevalent in our society since 2016 to already 2023. So, and who knows in the future as well.
Yeah, does anybody know the history on that?
I don't recall exactly why social media may not have been included at the time.
Is it because, like on social media, you can put anything on myself as just a citizen, but it's just if you're saying that as a board member,
Speaking on behalf of the board.
Right, that's where the thing is. And maybe that was just more unclear in 2016.
I would also argue, I don't have the historical reference, but in 2016, in definitions in our policy packet, social media may not have been defined. So without the definition, it's hard to put that term in actual language here, because if there's not a definition, it's ambiguous then to what social media is. Now that it's so prevalent and it's defined in our definitions, we know what that incorporates.
Then I see D, to members of the community. So that's an addition that they're looking to have added.
Yep.
So if I, as a board member, were to speak to any member of the community,
On behalf of the entire board.
I would have to according to this, I'd have to clarify, I'm not speaking on the entirety of the board. These are my opinions
Correct.
solely of my own, yada, yada, yada.
So is that the same as?
For
the
every
social
conversation I
media?
have with anybody in the community about anything in regards to the school district.
From,
Because you're,
I get what you're saying, because you're gonna have to.
Because
have
I'm
a-
also a
parent.
parent and a community member. And I can understand if I were to make a comment intentionally in regards to the district and a thought process I have as a board member, I would generally include that statement. Hey, I'm not speaking for the board, but these are my thoughts on that topic. But if I'm standing on the sideline of a sporting event and somebody asks me, how do you think the team's doing, or the X,
What
Y,
do you
or
think
Z
of the
in regards
facility,
to
right? Yeah.
whatever's performance, and I go, meh, could be better, couldn't be better, but I didn't say it, the qualifying statement, then am I locked in as violation of this? That would be,
The way I'd read, so an example would be if you're at a soccer game and someone says, how's your child's 5th grade teacher, or how are they enjoying Kennedy? And you said your opinion as a parent, which you're saying as a parent, you're saying without the qualifier of, I'm speaking as Mr. Ewert as a parent, not as a board member.
yeah.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's the language it's saying, is you need to state what you're speaking as, given you're an elected official, but also play dual roles in the community.
So if I go into my child's parent-teacher conference, I would have to clarify to that staff member what we're discussing would be the viewpoints of a parent and not as the member of a board.
I would think that, given you're in a parent-teacher conference,
Not-
right?
I just,
It's similar to the same
they're a member of a
conversation-
community, and
Yeah, we have with employees who are also parents, and
Yeah.
they're privy to information, and it has to be redirected by administration at times to say, you're a parent right now versus an employee of
Yeah.
the district. It's a recommendation. It's not that it needs to. It's recommended but
Yeah,
not required.
I don't necessarily know if I care one way or the other, but
We might
it
just
should
do-
it should be very important that the board understands if that's in there, those would be
Mhm.
the that's what you'd be governed by, so to speak, in regards to your conduct. I know I've been asked to speak at an event here or there, not representing the board, but with the knowledge of what it encompasses to be a member of a board. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I generally, in those situations, I will. This is not the view of our board. This is my opinion and what I've seen, learned, and gathered as far as information and my filter allows to process. I guess I would side with whichever way the committee wants to go on that one. I just would caution board expectations of all members understand the ramifications of that.
yeah, I think it's important that, as we are public officials, if we're making any kind of public statement, we have to put some context around there. Are you speaking as a parent or as a community member, or are you speaking as a board member? And if it's as a board member, you're just one member of that board. You're not speaking on behalf of the entire board. You're one of 7.
Mm-hmm. So, but understanding though, in a personal conversation, you still have to set that expectation. That's the,
But I guess we need to define then what is a public statement. I mean, if you're just having a conversation with somebody, that's not necessarily a public statement, right?
Well, or statements to individuals.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
personal
also-
conversation.
so
It's
from
sa-
time to
it's
time,
added
however,
above.
individual board members make public statements or statements to individuals
Well, then that's almost
on
every
school matters.
conversation that you
No,
have.
that's every conversation you have
It's just
involving.
ridiculous for me to have a conversation with someone and be like, just so you know, I'm not speaking as a board member. I mean, that would be insane.
I'm not
Yeah,
speaking
but
on
this is
behalf of the board.
specific
Well,
to
right, but you know, that's
school
almost every
matters.
conversation, anything I have an opinion
School
on.
school matters
Right.
related.
Right.
But that could be a wide range of things.
Sure,
School
but it's not
district-
about, hey, can you recommend your building inspector or something? Sure, then you don't have to say, hey, I'm speaking as, your neighbor.
I understand that it seems to be, though, that you would have more conversations surrounding a school-related topic, or could be construed to be a school-related topic.
Mhm. Because people know your board member.
Yeah,
If you go to a football game, anybody you talk to, you're gonna have to almost say that.
It-
Potential. I mean, it depends on the topic.
Yeah.
It depend, but
I can
it's-
think of 5 instances over the last weekend where I just answered as a parent, oh, son's having a great time in this activity. Now I'd have to say, as a parent, not speaking for the full board, my son's having. I get it. I'm playing semantics, but it's a real thing, and there's real people in this community that will really hold.
Mhm.
If you've made one time, you've made us participate in a conversation without that, or they overhear a portion of a conversation in which they didn't hear you make that
Sure.
because you led the conversation with it, that I can see some headaches coming about. Like I said, I'm not necessarily one way or the other. I just, when this comes to the full board, I think we should.
Well, the item D that you called out, 2 members of the community, is a new add to the policy. That's one of the revisions.
Mm-hmm.
Could certainly leave that out. If you think it's, I don't want to say too much to have to say it at every conversation, but
It's
But
too
then you-
broad
Certainly-
reaching.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then there's no difference to that in social media. I mean, it's the same kind of animal. Every time you put something up on social media, then you would have to do the same statement. Like, I'm
But you
not
could,
speaking
in social
depending-
media, your account could be labeled your name versus your name, school board member, right?
Okay.
That
And then
that
you don't have
distinguishes,
to-
it's similar to the
Okay.
conversations I have with you guys regarding your email,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
If you're a parent, if you're emailing as a parent to your child's teacher from, your cool dad 101 at
Sure.
Gmail, whatever it is, versus your school issue,
Gotcha.
that you're in a different lane then.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm not necessarily against it. I just want to make sure we understand the depth of what some people will take on the semantical argument.
I'll just go back to the overview again. It says, if not made clear that those statements do not reflect the views of the board or their colleagues on the board, this policy is related to when you're speaking, you're not speaking for the whole board, you're speaking for yourself.
Mhm.
And if we want to get specific on the policy, it looks to be that you're making public statements. If you're just having a conversation with somebody, I don't know
Yeah.
that that would necessarily be a
A
public
public
statement.
statement. Okay. Yeah, like I said, I'm not necessarily one way or the other. I just want.
Yep, so that's a good point, Tom. If you go to the bottom of the policy, A through E, it kind of lays out personal statements not intended for publication, statements by board members, non-school matters providing the statement do not identify the author as the member of the board, thank you letters.
All right, well, unless the committee has an objection, I would think, I'm comfortable with moving forward as recommended.
That's it.
Mike?
Legally, I'd just like to say, none of us speak for the board unless the board is in session. That's the only time we speak for the board, is when the board is in session. The board is not in session right now even, the committee is, but the
Mhm.
board is not. So what I've been doing is, the first time I respond to somebody by email, I tell them, I do not speak for the board when it is not in session. I only speak for myself via email. The second time I email them, I don't put that in there because I think they should know it already. I just told them in the last email. So I don't put it on every email, but I guess if I haven't heard from somebody in a few years, I would put it in there again just to cover myself. And
Yep.
Yeah, I think I do a similar thing on social media. I have like a tagline that sits atop the page. viewpoints and whatever's, right, expressed in this post or in the posts herein are of my own, and I do not speak of the board at this, whatever, right?
And that's
However you
what his
wanna-
policy's trying to uphold, is that
Yeah,
you can't say, I'm speaking on behalf of the board, unless it's the function of the board president or official spokesperson, which is myself, on behalf of the school district. This is what we're saying, but you don't have the authority to do that, to Michael's point, unless you're in session.
it's fine with me.
All right, let's move on. Policy 0144.3, conflict of interest.
Language has been added to this policy clarifying that board members may not be paid employees of the district. Also added is the statutory language that provides an opportunity for board members to serve as unpaid volunteers. And the appropriate legal references have also been added. It's recommended for comprehensiveness and clarity. So the addition to our current policy is related to if you wanted to be a volunteer coach or supervisor for a co-curricular activity related to State Statute 120.20.
Right. Any questions, comments?
So you cannot fill any of our vacancies, we just went through this.
Well, you could, but you have to.
We have to
volunteer,
resign.
right?
You would have to volunteer
Yeah,
or
So
resign.
volunteer or resign from the board. Russ, any questions?
Actually,
comments?
only for co-curricular or coaching is what you can volunteer for.
Yeah, you couldn't, and not any position in the district, only
Correct.
those two positions.
All right. We will go with the recommendation there. Moving on, policy 0164, meetings for common and union high schools, and this is one of our new policies.
Yeah, this is a new policy that will consolidate and incorporate all references to meetings, including regular and special meetings, into a single policy specific to common union high school districts. Additional optional language has been added to address virtual attendance in said meetings. So this one takes our existing policy 10164.1, 10164.2, and 10165.1, 0165.2, and consolidates them into one single policy instead of 6 separate policies.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
Well, I think it's smart to consolidate those into one. It's a little less of an Easter egg hunt.
Yeah, you'll see that as a theme tonight, and that's Neola. It's purposely saying, let's shrink policy manuals so there's not,
Yeah,
to
I
your
did-
point.
Yeah, I didn't notice any like direct changes other than just consolidation
Mhm.
to this, right? I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah. it's
Saw
pretty-
something I
pretty
didn't-
standard. When we're gonna have meetings, changes to meetings, special meetings,
Yeah.
if you can attend virtually, things like that.
Yep.
Okay. We're good there. You listed off all the ones that we are rescinding. Anyone have any comments or questions about those that are combined into this new policy? No? Okay, then I think that takes us to policy 1260. All right, incapacity of district administrator?
Yeah, my favorite policy. So this one, language has been added to this policy to provide temporary authority to the board president prior to the appointment of an interim district administrator when the current district administrator is incapacitated. It's a single line added in the first paragraph. Hope we never have to use this one.
Yes, I agree. I hope we never have to use this. No offense to our board president,
Yeah, that's not.
not at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But hopefully you do not become incapacitated. Any comments or questions from the committee?
I'm curious, isn't this how it already was? Even if it didn't state it, the board president would act as the district administrator if need be?
This is for clarity because it did not come out and say that. So
Okay.
it would be assumed, however, so that there's an actual statement, so that community is understanding.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that. We will move on to policy policy 1421, 3121, and 4121, criminal history record check and employee self-reporting requirements.
So this came to you back in September, and it's interesting, the area that's being stricken on the first page of the policy is language that we had some lengthy conversation around as a policy committee because it was very confusing. The feedback was given on behalf of Germantown School District to Neola from myself and our committee, as well as multiple districts shared this feedback. So that paragraph has been rewritten for clarity purpose, and I think it makes a lot more sense as you read it regarding staff discipline for each of the employee groups.
Yeah, I agree. It does bring a lot more clarity than it had previous. And if there's a question as to why we have 3 policies kind of grouped together, it's for different employee groups that all have almost identical language across them. Any comments or questions from the committee on this one? Or these 3, I should say?
Just trying to find my note here. So, minor traffic offenses, non-moving violations, speeding, failure to yield, failure to obey, traffic signal, unattended vehicle illegally parked, do not need to be reported.
Unless they operate in the
Yeah,
a district.
I had a note on there, but yes, and then it goes on to say, so disregard that.
And we have a list of people who do have, whether in all employee groups who have authority to operate district vehicles.
In which case, they do have to report on all of those things we just listed.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion on these 3? Okay. I think the next one is 8913, section 504 and ADA, prohibition against disability discrimination in employment. It's a new policy.
Yes, it'll be a new number in the series as well as then rename. This policy is added as a consolidation of existing policies 1623, 3123, 4123, all of which have been rescinded. In this update, the consolidation of these policies will assure consistent verbiage and procedures for all covered groups of individuals. And given that the policy covers accommodation requirements in addition to non-discrimination, it also encompasses more operational considerations. Therefore, the section numbers move to the 8,000s versus the different employee groups. In addition, this is a lengthy response, but I want to read all of it as there's many legal ramifications here for follow-through on this policy. In addition to consolidating the policies, the language of the policy has been revised in several ways, specifically to clarify mutual roles of employee and employer in the disability accommodation process, to replace restrictive timelines in an investigation while noting that the investigations are to be done as efficiently and practicable, but allowing for more generally reasonable timeline, and finally to remove reference to a hearing that is in practice a meeting opportunity as opposed to the connotations associated with the term hearing. You'll see in this policy some of the additions related to this. Also list Mr. Miziak as our district's compliance officer. That's consistent with our anti-harassment policy, Title IX, and non-discrimination as the lead investigator when concerns do arise related to 504 ADA. And that, again, to Mr. Barney's point, spans across multiple policies. It's being consolidated here, which would rescind the other 3 policies.
Thank you for the background. Any discussion on this one? No, it's several pages, so I'll give you a minute to glance through it again.
Yeah, I
Any
don't.
comments?
I mean, what I
No?
saw all makes.
Okay.
Sorry, I shook my head no when you asked the
Perfect.
question.
It's strongly
I can-
recommended by Neola.
Yeah, what we,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, and we will move forward with that one. Again, 1623, 3123, 4123 are being rescinded. So that will take us to 1630.01, 3430.01, and 4430.01, family and medical leave of absence, which is a revised policy.
In all 3, I have the same revision. The policy is revised to remove a potentially confusing reference to the status of full-time staff eligibility for FMLA based on the 1,250 work hours requirement for federal eligibility. This does not affect Wisconsin FMLA, which only requires an employee to be compensated for 1,000 hours in the previous year to be eligible for protective leave. While generally speaking, a full-time instructional staff member will be employed for more than 1,250 hours in the preceding year and does not track actual hours worked as an exempt employee. The law does not require that such employees be automatically considered eligible. There may be circumstances where an individual employee, perhaps due to leave taken in the preceding year, does not meet the requirements, even though they may be full-time contract. The adoption of this change and revision is strongly recommended. At the end of the day, it's saying that full-time employees exceed 1,250 hours, and there's not a need to have that language in here as a requirement. We do track internally in HR if an employee has not met that as a full-time employee the previous year, if it's their first year because were out on an additional leave or whatever it might be, or they started not in a full calendar year, which you have to have a full calendar year at a minimum under your belt in order to be eligible federally for FMLA.
Any discussion from the committee on removing one sentence from paragraph 3? All right, we will move forward. That will take us to policy 3139 and 4139 regarding staff discipline.
This policy is revised to include resignation as being covered in either policy 3140 or policy 4140. Language has been added with regard to investigation involving potential criminal conduct and assurance of a garrity warning in appropriate circumstances. So that clause around garrity and the employee's legal obligation to answer in an investigation for more clarity. My understanding is this policy, as you revised in 2020, has come under fire in districts related to not having that garrity clause language in there.
All right, any comments or questions from the committee? No? Okay, we'll move forward with that one. That takes us to another one of our new policies, policy 8700, nursing mothers.
So we are looking to rescind policy 4430.05 and replace it with 8700, nursing mothers. The Providing Urgent Maternal Protections for Nursing Mothers Act, called PUMP, expands the rights afforded nursing mothers that were previously provided to non-exempt employees to cover all employees. Neola's combining policy to cover all employee groups to replace the current nursing mother policy. The requirements are now in effect, and although the requirements only apply when an employee makes a request for space and time to express breast milk, it is advisable to give consideration to how these rights will be administered when request is made. For example, administrators are advised to consider what spaces will be suitable for use in each of the district's buildings and how the schedules can be managed, particularly in the case of classroom teachers. Doing so in advance of any request being made will make the implementation easier when requested or received. Just a side note, a bathroom is not considered a legal space for this policy. It has to be outside of a restroom, or unless it's a designated, some schools have built designated nursing mother's rooms for said exercise. I know that our administration works with the employee to find an optimal space that's private, can be secured so that students or other staff don't walk in, and they work through a schedule that makes the most sense and get coverage as needed. So this policy just would uphold the practices we're already engaging in.
Any comments, questions, discussion from the committee? Okay. As Dr. Reuter mentioned, we will rescind 4430.05 in place of this new policy. And that would take us to policy 8310, public records.
There is an extensive overview. I'm going to give you the shortened version. The state of Wisconsin, DPI, released a new records retention book outlining a records retention schedule for pertinent Wisconsin public school records. That is called the GRS. It contains a retention schedule for school-specific records, including student records, and therefore adopted, or alternatively, the board must adopt its own schedule that includes a records retention for student records to account for what we are legally obligated. The recommendation here is to adopt the Wisconsin Public School District related records timeline, which expires in March 20th, 2033. So if any of us are here, we'll have this conversation again in 10 years. And then that would then mean that the district would retain public records in accordance with the preceding general records schedule that was in place for all other records outside of student records. A good rule of thumb is to retain records, which I would have our administration do for 7 years. Some of that exceeds the expectation, but 7 years is kind of the standard when it comes to records retention. So really the change in policies that we're adopting, the new records retention schedule set forth by the state, and all records that are not part of that record retention schedule will retain for up to 7 years.
All right. Thank you for that clarity.
Otherwise, as you see what's in green with lines through it, in those years we'd have to come forward with those specific schedules to get approved. This way we're encompassing everything on a 7-year schedule plus the student records schedule.
Taking A and B eliminates us having to go C through K.
Correct. Which would be action you see in those years. Again, we'd be here November 11th of this year for item I. This is what most schools did. We had actually a WASB or a WASDA state superintendent's virtual meeting last spring when this came out, and their legal team outside of Neola, who had said the same thing, said just move forward with this is the easiest and most smart way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any discussion from the committee? All right, that takes us to the end of our policies that we had to review tonight. Does the committee have any other policies that fit between 0100 and 98,000.01 that they'd like to discuss?
I do not. At
Okay.
this time.
I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to move forward with a positive recommendation to the full board to approve the updates and modifications to district policies 0100 to 9800.01.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Kim and a second by Russ. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. And that moves us to item 11. Sorry, item 6. Jump ahead here. Way ahead. Item 6.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned at 6:44. Thanks, everybody, and drive home safe.